unity in purpose drives progress. And this is true with certain specific sectors, like the realm of labor market and migration in countries. On this episode of The Next Guest from the 973 show, we are sitting down with officials who are working together to make this dynamics better in Bahrain. With us are Fahad Binali, the Director of Outreach and Partnership at the Labor Market Regulatory Authority, and Erika, the Interim Chief of Mission at the International Organization of Migration. Welcome, both of you. We are shifting, or we are changing the dynamics of podcasts from one guest to two, this episode being very special because we are working together. Thank you, Fahad and Erika, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us. It's really, really a pleasure.
Yeah, and it's something very important for us as well, because being a local voice, it's very important to promote or project such an important project at the LMRA and IOM, which is working together. As I understand, it's a collaborative effort to reach out to the community. So we would love to hear from both of you to begin with, from the LMRA and the IOM perspectives about project working together. Let's begin with you, Fahad.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I'm very pleased with this partnership and this campaign and to be partnered with the IOM, because ultimately we both share the same goal. And the key idea of the campaign is to raise awareness of rights and responsibilities for both employees and employers. But also another important element for us is to break that barrier between LMRA and stakeholders generally. And one of our key sub-goals is to build trust, establish ongoing communication and a regular dialogue, and not just getting together over permits and fines.
And that was a very neat introduction, Fahad, I would say, especially the last two words, permits and fines, because that's how I think people relate LMRA with. But I must admit that it is changing. The narrative is changing and people are feeling free to approach, to discuss, to understand, which I find is a good sign.
Yes.
Let's hear from Erika.
So, maybe just building a little bit on also what Fahad was saying, working together is all about making sure that everyone has the information they need to succeed. And that's not only as employers in their businesses, but also as workers who, for many are foreign workers who have come to Bahrain to be supporting their families back at home and to be also achieving their own dreams and goals. So I think we recognize that information is power in this case, and it can really be an important contributing factor to empowering all work parties. So working together, and I think here the name of it is very much acknowledging that if we really want to reach everyone that needs to be reached with the information, we need to be working all together. And this is where we always speak about a multi-stakeholder approach. So who are all the different stakeholders that need to be at the table to really make sure that we are providing the information that people need in the way that they want to receive it and when they want to receive it. So this, I think, working together it's a really, really wonderful opportunity. I think to be working very, very closely with LMRA, but also a number of different stakeholders as well that we've seen really coming forward to support this initiative. So we're very excited.
Yes, the name is amazing. Working together is the name for this project. And as you rightly said, empowering the migrants, especially in a country like Bahrain, which have different levels of expatriates, right from the low income working class to the highest. And all of us are migrants. So everybody need to know their rights, need to know where to go, how, when, and that is empowering. And this project, I'm sure. Let's continue with you, Erika. Can you tell specifically, what is IOM's part on this project?
Oh, thank you for that question. So IOM, we are the UN Agency for Migration. What we're really doing in this partnership is bringing our global expertise and experience in awareness raising campaigns that we've, done in a number of different countries in the world, with a focus on migrants and employers. and really looking at the good practices that we have from other contexts and bringing it here. So we have, and maybe I can go into this a little bit more. So we have an approach at IOM called CIOP, which is the Comprehensive Information and Orientation Program approach. The idea here is that in adopting this approach, when we're looking at providing information to different groups, it makes us remember how we can make sure that we're always prioritizing impact. So just a few examples. When is the right time to be providing the information? Is it based in a human rights foundation? Is it something that is also thinking about dimensions of vulnerability? So for example, we have this principle at the UN, which is leave no one behind, which really makes us think and ensure that at the forefront of our activities is thinking about who is the hardest profiles to reach, and are we doing everything we can in our project to make sure that we're reaching them and we're prioritizing them. So I think this is a little bit of what we're bringing. We're really trying to bring our experience from other countries, but also support in tailoring this to the priorities of not only LMRA, but also I think the other stakeholders that are part of this project.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erika. Coming to you, Fahad, given the dynamics of the labor market of Bahrain with more than 50% of the population being expats, I know it's no easy job to work together under the project. But yes, with the support of the IOM, I'm sure there are so many, you've divided it, right? You've broken it down into how to reach out to these people out there. Could you brief us on what are the initiatives that you have under working together to ensure that people are empowered, people know about what we should be doing and what we shouldn't?
Yeah, well, there are a few key issues here. The first is we both share the two underpinning principles with the IOM and the UN of a whole of society approach and leaving no one behind. So, as you know, the LMRA is the lead agency in combating trafficking in persons here in Bahrain. So identifying who's at most risk of exploitation, who's at most exposed to vulnerability is where we are focusing our efforts. But we're not stopping there. So we're engaging with the public sector, community leaders, faith-based organizations to try to identify gaps in awareness, to try to tailor information in a way that is accessible, applicable, and relevant, and to do that. So we started this campaign with core principles and core goals and key targets as well, but we're also incorporating the views and contributions of stakeholders as we go. Because working together is also not just a name. We really are working together in how best to deliver that message and how best to address key issues and problems. So yeah, and as you said, a big chunk of the labor market, the vast majority actually, is migrant workers. So it is a relevant stakeholder and a key group. One, in terms of trafficking in persons, and two, in terms of regulating the labor market as well. So there's no getting away from that.
Right. And I'll continue with you, Fahad. When you mean, you just said stakeholders. It's the employees, employers, the government, all the NGOs, isn't it? I'm sure there would be challenges in bringing them together, uniting them, or making them sit around a table, or laying down, the terms and the clause. Do you want to comment on the challenges and how do you plan to overcome those?
Well, it's important to say that over the past decade, Bahrain has built a very robust infrastructure in terms of protections and prevention and combating trafficking in persons. But what we have noticed is that there are gaps in awareness. A lot of the time, an individual facing a problem may not come to the Expert Protection Center as a first recourse. They will come to it as a last resort, making the problem ever more complicated and more difficult. So we're trying to address these causes. Getting together diplomatic missions, communities, private sector, public sector, yes, they all have different areas of focus and different interests, but we're trying to group them under similar goals and similar aims. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, the original agreement with the IOM was to have this as a year-long campaign. But we've seen that level of engagement and that level of trust building and relationship building requires a longer time. So we from the LMRA side, I think we're keeping this as an ongoing campaign. And the awareness and communication bridge of the LMRA to bring all these peoples together and to prioritize these issues. Because just as much as the interests of stakeholders diverge, there is a lot of common ground to build on. So that's what we're focusing on.
Okay. And Erika, I just want to know, is this project unique to Bahrain, or is it a larger project of IOM or something like that? Did you tailor it for this market?
So, I mean, I think we see a number of awareness-raising campaigns globally. But I think what has been very, very special here is that both LMRA and IOM at the beginning of this process sat down and really prioritized a co-design approach to awareness raising. So we didn't launch right into activities. The first thing that we did is, sat down and said, okay, we need to make sure that everyone who we would ultimately be targeting, right, through working together has a say at the beginning. So this is why we worked together on putting together a series of surveys that LMRA launched and made sure that were available and accessible online, where all the different groups were invited to provide their feedback. Like, what do they want to see in this campaign? What are the information gaps at the moment? And with all of that information, we're then tailoring the activities and the materials of working together to really make sure that there's impact. And I think maybe just sharing what I thought is a very important observation. As we're looking more and more at the information that's come through these surveys, one of the big takeaways is that a lot of people aren't aware of the support services that are already available. And this is a really, really key point. And I think here, this is why we're very happy that one of the first things after the launch of this project was 2 events, right? So the first one was actually a tour hosted by LMRA, inviting community representatives of the Expat Protection Center. And this is very much a little bit of a reaction to seeing that a lot of the surveys showed that people aren't necessarily aware of all the support services that are already available. And then the second was a really, really fun and I think great opportunity to sit down with community representatives from over 20 communities in Bahrain in a workshop to actually start really planning together what the campaign needs to look like to be effective for their specific communities. So I think, yes, while we see awareness raising campaigns all around the world, I think specifically for the one that we're seeing here in Bahrain is very mindful. It's very thoughtful. I think the approach at the beginning has really been looking at how do we ensure impacts? How do we ensure that this is something sustainable? And how do we also make sure that everyone who would ultimately be benefiting are at the table with us at the very beginning, part of the discussions.
And congratulations on both the events. It was very nice, the tour as well as the workshop, and also the first forum on tips.
Yes.
That is where I think we officially launched working together. That was a very interesting concept, and I'm very happy to know that working together would be an ongoing campaign. Though initially it was said it was a year-long. So I think we need it. It should be ongoing, isn't it? Unless I don't think otherwise it would serve its purpose. It has to be ongoing because newer people are coming and they still need the support, and it has to be streamlined is what I feel. So there were a few announcements made by the CEO of the LMRA at the launch. Fahad, would you take us through that, which I think was very expat friendly, and people should know about what we have in hand, as Erika said, to add, like what is readily available in the country.
Yes, of course. I think I'm very pleased with and proud, to be honest, of the first LMRA Combating Trafficking in Persons Forum. It was an opportunity to let everybody know, and I say stakeholders, not to be impersonal, but because it really does include everybody, from Bahraini officials, private sector, public sector, like I said, diplomatic missions, and community actors as well. It was a good standing point to let everybody know what the LMRA is working on, what have they completed, what are they ready to announce, and we decided to launch it on the World Day for Combating Trafficking in Persons, and it's a good halfway point in the year to let everybody know. In that forum, a few announcements were made, chiefly the initiative for IBANs on arrival. So in addition to receiving a free SIM card, you receive an IBAN as well, which really addresses the issue of the difficulty of having to set up a bank account in a new country, but also the other more immediate effect is it would increase compliance with the wage protection system, because one of the main barriers to compliance is a lack of a bank account, and whether it's from the employer side or the employee side. So it just eliminated that barrier. So it's one of those initiatives as well. To a few other initiatives which we're proud of, which came as a result of our conversations with community leaders from the campaign. One, an important element in the forum was a panel discussion showcasing good practices in the private sector, because through our conversations with the private sector for the campaign, we've realized that a lot of them engage in very good practices in terms of raising awareness, in terms of ensuring rights and responsibilities, in terms of checking compliance. But these good practices would rarely have the opportunity to be highlighted. So we thought, why not showcase these good practices? It might have an effect to, one, encourage more of them to appear, and others to be inspired by them and follow suit. So it should have a knock-on effect. Another important element is the community and the consular support services. So through our conversations with community leaders, especially communities from West African countries, which do not have a permanent diplomatic mission here in Bahrain. The issue there was the long wait time for issuing passports and just receiving consular services in general. And say your passport expires, for example, and you can't renew it, then you can't renew your work permit, then you become irregular, then you enter the spiral of vulnerability and exploitation. So working with the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Interior, we decided to offer up the Sanabis branch ground floor free of charge on weekends for diplomatic missions without a permanent residence here in Bahrain for use. So by taking the cost of the venue, you also eliminate the barrier. So while that's really not directly within the LMRA's mandate or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs mandate or the Ministry of Interior, but we did see that issue. What it does also, it would reduce individuals awaiting deportation from needlessly spending months in deportation centers waiting for their documents to be processed. So hopefully that goes a long way. And that's why Erika said it's a consultative approach and a collaborative approach. So these are just a few, and there are plenty. And this is why we need more than a year.
Indeed. And I think I also took the survey, and I think the survey was very helpful to voice, like, what are the gaps? And like one such as what you said, the countries which don't have a resident mission, So that's a very nice initiative. Before we come to a few trivia, I'll just throw some questions from a common expat's point of view as we close. Before that, I would want to hear from you, like, how or what are the media that through which you would be propagating this working together initiatives? Of course, social media, I can see that you're doing, and the two lovely posters behind you in all different languages. Whenever I see that poster, the number of languages represent Bahrain so beautifully, which is home to so many nationalities, isn't it? So one is obviously social media. What are the other ways that you try to or planning to reach out to? And what's new, like the workshop and the tour? Is there anything that you're coming up with? Erika or Fahad?
I'll lay the groundwork first. So one of the things we realized is that we have done a lot of awareness sessions in partnership with the IOM, but the immediate reach and impact is for those who attended in person, plus one or two if they mention it, or a bit more if they share it on social media. But what we've realized at the LMRA is that our own social media channels are not designed to deliver these kind of messages, are not designed to reach the audience we'd like to reach. So we're currently working on launching our own working together social media, and that would be completely community focused, stakeholder focused, and events focused. That should amplify the reach. But the IOM has been also very extremely helpful in terms of the need assessment, identifying the gaps in information, what needs to be included there. So I can pass to Erika for that.
So I think just in terms of what's coming up next,
yes,
we and this is very much based on the survey, but also the first community actors workshop, and I underline that it's the first. Because I think one of the big takeaways from that workshop is while we had a number of communities represented, not only representing their countries of origin, but also, specific causes, there's a number of other communities also that we look forward to engaging with. So based on the survey and a lot of really, really productive and insightful conversations at the workshop, each community, we're working now with each of those communities on action plans. Okay. That would allow us to tailor activities that would make the most impact in their communities. And I think it's been great because I think the conversations with different communities has also shown how people might best consume information. So we've had conversations where communities have said, we can do an awareness raising session with our communities, but let's play board games, like games of our country while we're doing this, because it'll put the community at ease. Nice. and break down barriers. We've had other conversations where they've said, town hall, ask us anything format would work best, right? So for us, we're prioritizing this tailored approach to make sure that it's sustainable in the long run. So we're going to be working on these action plans. This will allow us to essentially roll out specific awareness raising events, not only for each community, but also really, and I'm glad that Fahad brought it up, with private sector. Because employers, we really recognize employers play a fundamental role, not only in the lives of expatriate workers when they're in Bahrain, but also to complement their own initiatives and their own efforts that they're pushing forward with their workforces. So definitely there's going to be different events. There's also going to be information materials. And here, this is what we like to call information touch points. Where are the places, not only physical locations, but also online platforms where people best interact with information? Where do they look for this information? And we've seen that this is also based on communities' preferences. Some communities prefer platforms like Facebook, others Instagram and TikTok. And then, of course, in line with, the leave no one behind principle, we also have a series of offline information touch points where we want to make sure that key information, particularly on the hotline, right? The trafficking hotline to report not only, possible incidences of trafficking, but also for worker inquiries and questions, that is everywhere. And offline, these are places like cold stores, because, we recognize that there might be groups of workers that maybe will have, frequent access to cold stores and other places like that. So you're going to see this both offline and online in terms of these key messages, as well as through, awareness raising events that we'll be doing in partnership with employers and also community actors.
Amazing. I think that's a beautiful way to reach out to the community. I love the idea of board games and awareness, and that took me to my community. We are very vibrant and colorful. We have festivals, and I think you guys should be there out when we are in our festive mode, So, as you said, we gather information, and it would lie there. Great. Let me ask you a few.
Can I add to
that?
that?
Sure, Fahad.
So what we're doing with the community actors as well, as you said, we're inviting them to our events, but we're also asking them to invite us to their events.
Yes.
But also I wanted to add two things. One is, as Erika touched upon, the private sector, right? But the private sector, what they can offer us as well is allowing us to reach usually a difficult segment to reach. So what we have announced the launch of as well is the Employers Orientation Program for domestic workers, because that removes the awareness barrier from being placed solely on the domestic worker, but also addressing the employer of the domestic worker. Many disagreements or disputes happen not because of malice, but because of lack of awareness on the side of the employer. So this piloting program with the IOM is that rather it's very difficult to reach employers in their homes. Homes are seen as private. So the innovation there is we reach them in their workplaces. And we do these sessions over there, the orientation sessions, and they can count as training hours as well. So it makes corporate sense, it makes individual sense, and it makes sense in the rights sense and preventative sense. The second issue is, as Erika said, that the Expat Protection Center tour was the first. And this comes as a direct result of feedback, because usually when we engage with the communities, how they go about addressing a problem that they're facing with their employer or at work is they first speak to a friend. If that doesn't work, they speak to the embassy. If that doesn't work, then they come to us. We're trying to collapse that and breaking that barrier by expanding the pool of people who have seen firsthand what to expect when you walk in. And another question is, if you're a regular, or you don't have a valid work permit, can you walk into the expat center, ask for help, and walk out? And the answer is yes. We're not enforcement officers here, so our core function is to offer advice and to help in whatever way we can. And that's been a key message, that we cannot deliver alone and we cannot deliver without community actors. So this is, I think, a very good consequence, I think.
Yes, I think you set the stage for me for some questions which has come to us, To begin with, we have the headquarters of LMRA in Sanabis, right? And where we are seated is the Sehla Expat Protection Center. How are these two different? Like, what happens here, what happens there?
From an awareness perspective?
Yes, As an expatriate, how do I know where to go?
Well, just to make it easy, right? So the Sanabis headquarters is for employers and employment affairs.
Okay.
The Expat Protection Center here is completely focused on the worker, completely focused on the employee, completely focused on prevention and protection. So if you have an issue or a complaint or going through difficulties, whether it's if your passport is being withheld, or if you are experiencing working in unsafe conditions or unpaid overtime or forced overtime,
non-payment of wages?
Non-payment of wages, of course, all the way to serious cases of, ranging from verbal assault, physical assault, sexual assault. You can come here.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is the help center. Over there is mostly the
administrative and
yes.
So this place, correct me, it was for families in the beginning. At the time when, am I right?
Families?
The Expat Protection Center was for expats living with families. Is it any more restricted like that?
No.
It's open to all.
Open to all, and all skill levels.
All skill levels.
So you've got from and this is one thing we've been reaching as well. It's not for a certain set or a certain skill set. Whether if you're an expat on a work permit, and for example there is a refusal to pay indemnity pay, or no vacation time or paid leave, this is relevant to you as well. And we've had conversations with a lot of professionals who did not know that these services were available, like legal services free of charge, translation services free of charge. Because we understand that at the center here, that coming to a new country and dealing with a new legal system in a language that you don't speak, yes, you can access justice, but accessing justice is difficult. So that bridges the gap in terms of language and processing and filing and they do that on your behalf.
All right. And the shelter that we're talking about, like what kind of people are sheltered here, or what should social workers know? Like, because we come across cases where people end up on the streets without a job or not being paid or due to their irregular residency status. So when a person is irregular, it's impossible for a social worker to get him into a place to put him into, say, a hotel or, as with a family. So that's when we need shelters. So I think this is the only official shelter in the country, right?
It's a shelter for victims of trafficking. Yes, those who are in a vulnerable state and are being exploited. And if you call 995, the trafficking hotline, they would screen for indicators. If you come here, they would screen for indicators. But the problem we're facing is, really, I think by the time a victim of trafficking realizes that they are a victim of trafficking, they're in too deep. So what they do, and why we encourage people to come, is they look for indicators, unpaid wages, unpaid overtime, things like that, because these can be evidence of other things. And early intervention really does work in these cases. But that's the center. But an important thing to understand is everybody walking in is presumed as a victim. We don't wait for the public prosecution to identify you as a victim, and you're treated as such with care and with protection.
Right. I remember the Labour Ministry officials always used to send out messages, don't wait for 2 to 3 to 5 months till you don't get your pay. Come report. That's exactly what he said, prevention. Before you get deep into the trouble, you get in. When you said walking into this, there were many other centers set up across Bahrain. The LMRA support centers, are they still active? Like one in the industrial area in Sitra, one in Mina Salman, like walk-in places where services are there. Are they still active?
Yes, they are still active.
Okay. People can go there as well, because that was to the proximity. Like, not everyone have to come all the way.
But you can think of it as those are extensions of the main branch, offered for convenience. In terms of protections and support, this is a place you want to be.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you're hesitant about coming in, just call 995 and ask at least, or see what they can do, and then before you come in. But if you're in a position, a work relationship where you feel like you're treated unfairly, or something is not going right, if you're not, if you're working in a different capacity than your contract, making way less, or hasn't been stated, this is where you need to start.
And what were the languages in 995, the hotline?
I think there
English?
English, Arabic.
Regional languages. Before we used to have almost 10 languages.
Yes, that case remains.
Okay.
So hotline workers are there, and they can speak in a number of languages. There are also translators here in the center to bridge the language gap. So there are about 7 to 10 languages here at any given time.
Right. One important question. Should people be scared of LMRA inspections? Because every day we read in news the LMRA inspection and hundreds are being deported, 200 deported, 370 deported. The headlines are scary, right? So this is a common expatriates question. Should we be scared of LMRA inspections?
No, and also there are two types of inspections. One is preventative monitoring, and the other one is compliance. And ultimately, one checks for, I guess, human rights compliance and preventative, and the other one checks with labor market regulations compliance. So it's not targeted at anybody or at expats for deportation. It's targeted to ensure that employers are compliant with labor market regulations, which is underlined by creating a fair and safe workplace and avoiding exploitation. So it comes from that sense. It's not punitive or a campaign against migrant workers. No, there is an acknowledgement from everybody in Bahrain, especially in the campaign, that we are all working together to build a Bahrain. Bahrain has always been an island with many nationalities, so it's not from that perspective. It's from a compliance and protection perspective. But I'd be interested to hear the IOM's view on the inspections.
Yeah, I was about to do that. From the larger perspective, as a UN organization, how do you look at these inspections? I do understand that it is the need, and as you rightly said, it is to ensure that law is implemented, and but still people get scared, isn't it, when it's the authority? So what is your take, Erika, on that?
So I think a few thoughts on this. One, everyone has the obligation to
abide
ensure
by the law.
To abide by national law. The other aspect of this is that I also think that it's important that we look at the alternative options that are available. So here I would take note of the registered worker permits in Bahrain that offers the opportunity for eligible workers to essentially self-sponsor. And those who are in situations of irregularity are mostly eligible for this permit, right? So for me, that's an important, because I've seen the trajectory in the country of really exploring self-sponsorship work permit modalities and the opportunities that it gives to workers. So I think this is also, it's an important acknowledgement in that there are alternatives to situations of irregularity. But then I also think that it's very important to note that many find themselves in situations of irregularity on also, some of the things that we've already discussed today, right? In terms of different dimensions of vulnerability that, a worker might face, that they end up in a situation of irregularity through no fault of their own. And this is where the protection architecture in the country is really supposed to be supporting them. And this is why the awareness raising around the support services available is critical. And now full circle back, this is why working together as an awareness raising campaign is really, for me, that step towards making sure that everyone, also those who are most vulnerable, who find themselves in situations of irregularity, understand the options that are at their disposal to support them, right? And to really, really provide assistance and support. Because also, while we talk about working together, the slogan of working together is
to inform, to support, to protect.
Right? And this is really what's at the heart of it. So I think those are really the 3 points that I would mention here. And I think maybe as a final point is, Raji, I think it's what you initially said. Trust building, right? Between workers who might be fearful and authorities is also an aim under working together. And this is why it's so critical that we have different groups and stakeholders around the table so that we can really start breaking down these barriers to make sure that maybe those who have been scared to come forward and to speak about their situation or to seek support feel more at ease and comfortable knowing that they can access support and assistance.
Yes, definitely. We can discuss on and on because it's such a wide topic. We can do that more often in the coming days. We could take public questions and respond to them, their concerns and queries. But before we conclude, I would love to hear from both of you on this one segment, which I have always, my heart lies close to this sector as a journalist and as a socially committed person, the domestic workers. Under working together, are you planning something specific for them? Because I consider them the most vulnerable because of lack of access. We always know that because they work in private homes. And unfortunately, they're not well paid and they're forced to, the middlemen issues, the sending country and the receiving country, the middlemen, the contracts, the lack of a proper contract or language barriers, especially the countries like India or for that matter, Philippines. These are the countries that we see. And of course, Sri Lankans, the female domestic workers, and of course, and also the male domestic workers. Are you planning something or do you already have something? I would love to hear the IOM's point of view from the larger perspective as to what is the UN, from that perspective, and from Fahad on the local perspective, please.
Sure.
You want to go first?
Sure. So I think we acknowledge that domestic work as a sector, domestic workers can't face more vulnerability. This is not something that we see also specific to Bahrain.
Yes.
It's something that we also acknowledge, globally. As a sector that's, most, I wouldn't even say most at risk, but do face specific risks and vulnerabilities. And I think we've seen as IOM and also in partnership with other UN agencies, a number of really, really good practices that are rolled out to support the professionalization of the sector. And this is really, at the heart of it, is the acknowledgement that the domestic work sector is a professional sector, and therefore employers need to appreciate that if they have someone working in their homes, their home then becomes a workplace. And the same consideration for the worker. And this is something that we've seen takes time. It's really a question of that positive behavioral change that I think needs to really be cultivated and fostered. In terms of working together and maybe bringing it back to Bahrain, I think that we've seen that this is really a point of priority and an acknowledgement, both, under the campaign, both with LMRA and IOM. And I think there's very, very targeted actions. So under working together, I won't go into it too much, but one of the target groups under working together are domestic workers. Another one of the target groups are employers of domestic workers.
Okay.
So throughout, from the very beginning, when we were actually designing the project, these were already two groups that are not afterthoughts. They're very much part and parcel of the groups that we're looking to engage with. And we've seen this through conceptualization and now also implementation. When we mentioned physical information touch points, the reason why we've prioritized cold stores, for example, to have stickers that say 995 or that's available in different languages, is because we recognize that it's domestic workers, right, who may be more exposed to the cold stores near their employers' homes that would then be able to see some of these materials. And same thing, and Fahad mentioned this already a little bit, targeted information initiatives for employers of domestic workers to really acknowledge that the recruitment and the employment process can be difficult to navigate. So providing very clear practical information and guidance also into employers will help the employer-employee relationship. I'll stop there, right?
Yes.
But yes, it's absolutely a point of priority in working together because we are very much prioritizing leave no one behind. And, we recognize that domestic workers and employers of domestic workers can really support this.
Fahad, would you like to add to it?
Yes. So, picking up from what Erika has said, I can go into a bit of specifics. I think previously we discussed the Employers Orientation Program, which we touched upon, and the Post-Arrival Orientation Program for domestic workers, which the LMRA and the IOM worked on last year. So these two complete the equation where you have awareness raising for the domestic worker and then awareness raising for the employer. The second element of this program is to do it in person as well, which is a very good way in changing culture. Talking about what Erika has stated about domestic worker is a profession, is the underlying idea that the home is the workplace and they are entitled to time off, break times, paid leave, and you do that. And if you do that in person, it's very easy. It's easier to bring somebody on board than reading it through a manual or a guide. And I think that's very much. And something we're working together on. What the last issue is as well is the wage protection system and the IBAN on arrival. So there is going to be new updates to the wage protection system, but also the IBAN on arrival targets domestic workers as well, because leaving the home is difficult sometimes, and creating a bank account is much more difficult than somebody working in any other field. So if you address that in the beginning, then you could also track in terms of wage protection. You could, with the SIM cards and the phone, you ensure that they do have telecommunications and can reach help avenues before it's too late. So the programs are designed with them in mind as well. The last thing I want to say before I close, because we all talked about trust, and there's an intimidation factor between dealing with the LMRA. But regardless of the problem, I think that the key takeaway point we got from engaging with community leaders is, yes, you can come and complain and get advice, whether you're regular or not, and go about your business and complete your day-to-day activities. And what Erika highlighted as well in terms of the registered worker program, if you're irregular, you may be eligible, and that really adds another layer of protections on you in terms of the peace of mind of being regular, and then health insurance and access to social services and things like that. So do not hesitate about coming. Because one of the main things we say is that the worst that could happen is you'd walk away disappointed. And even if that happens, we're open to negative feedback because it really does help refine the process.
Right. Yeah, well said and beautifully concluded, Fahad. I was just going through the languages on the posters behind. I can identify, I think I can read at least 4 languages in that. All the words are so beautiful, positive, inform, respect, help, succeed, partnership, protection, security, safety, education.
We got trust, care, and
support. Trust. I was just reading this. Trust, care, trust. Educate. That summarizes working together. And from the expat side, I thank the LMRA and the IOM for this beautiful initiative. And I'm proud that the second home of mine for almost quarter a decade is scaling heights. Be it the TIPS report or such initiatives and activities, it's nice to see the country where we are living is attempting to bridge the gap. This is not an easy feat. We understand, given the population of the expat community here and the variety of people here, the cultures are different, the language is different. It's not easy, but hats off to teams IOM and LMRA for all the initiatives that you're doing to make us feel safer, better. And thank you for all the information, support, and protection that you offer. Any final comments before we wrap up?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having us on 973 Show. Really, really appreciate it. I have one request to 973 Show listeners and viewers. Please engage with working together, whether it's providing feedback, recommendations, giving us ideas for events, questions that you want answered. I mean, anything and everything that you think would help, whether it's yourself or your communities. This is really what it's all about. So we're really, really looking forward to working together.
Indeed.
Thank you so much. And it is always a pleasure to have 995 cooperating with 973.
That's nice.
But I'd like to echo and reiterate Erika's invitation for people to extend and engage. Because we both deeply believe that we cannot succeed on this mission by ourselves.
Yes.
And it has to be a collaborative approach, it has to be a representative approach, and that requires engagement. But also underlying that engagement is trust. So we are really building on that and open to your thoughts and constructive criticism. And our doors are open. And let us know. Thank you.
Sure. And I think the warmth and the way Bahrain embraces us, the expat community in the kingdom are so ready to give back, be it volunteers, be it in any kind of support. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for talking to us. And as I said in the beginning, it's unity with a purpose that drives progress. And as the officials said, we have to be together in this drive so that we all live in a secure world, especially beautiful Bahrain. This is Raji Unikrishnan signing off.